Marcus Chen had always been the type of person others looked past. Standing barely 5 feet 7 inches tall with a lean frame that seemed almost fragile, he possessed none of the commanding presence that people expected from someone pursuing a military career. His quiet demeanor and soft-spoken nature made him nearly invisible in crowded rooms, and throughout his life, he had grown accustomed to being underestimated. Growing up in a small farming town in rural Ohio, Marcus spent most of his childhood helping his grandfather tend to their modest vegetable farm. While other boys his age were playing football or basketball, Marcus found himself drawn to activities that required patience and precision. He would spend hours in the barn, carefully adjusting old farming equipment or meticulously organizing tools according to size and function. His grandfather, a weathered man who had served briefly in the Korean War, noticed the boy's natural attention to detail, but never pushed him toward any particular path. The decision to join the military came not from a burning desire to serve his country, though that feeling would develop later, but from a simple lack of alternatives. Marcus graduated from high school with decent grades, but no clear direction for his future. College seemed financially impossible for his family, and the local job market offered little beyond minimum wage positions at the grain elevator or the small manufacturing plant that employed most of the town's residents. When the Army recruiter visited his high school during his senior year, Marcus sat in the back of the auditorium, listening to tales of adventure, brotherhood, and purpose. The recruiter, Sergeant Williams, was everything Marcus was not. Tall, broad-shouldered, and confident, he commanded attention with every gesture and word. As students peppered him with questions about combat roles and special operations, Marcus remained silent, uncertain whether someone like him would even be accepted into such an organization. After the presentation, as students filed out discussing which military occupational specialties sounded most exciting, Marcus lingered behind. Sergeant Williams noticed the thin young man approaching hesitantly and prepared himself for what he assumed would be routine questions about basic training or educational benefits. Instead, Marcus asked something unexpected. He wanted to know about the roles that required the most precision, the jobs where small details mattered more than physical strength or aggressive personality. Sergeant Williams found himself intrigued by this quiet teenager who seemed more interested in technical accuracy than glory. During the recruitment process, Marcus underwent the standard battery of tests and evaluations that all potential soldiers faced. His physical fitness scores were adequate but unremarkable. He could complete the required push-ups and sit-ups, though barely, and his 2-mile run time placed him in the lower third of acceptable performance. The recruiters noted his results with little enthusiasm, viewing him as another marginal candidate who would likely struggle through basic training before being assigned to some support role far from any real action. However, when Marcus took the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, something interesting emerged from the scores. While his overall results were solid, he demonstrated exceptional spatial reasoning abilities and scored remarkably high on sections that measured fine motor control and attention to detail. The test administrator, a veteran who had processed thousands of these evaluations, made a note in Marcus's file about his unusual combination of patience and precision. When Marcus arrived at Fort Benning for basic training, his first impression was one of overwhelming chaos. The reception station buzzed with activity as hundreds of new recruits processed through medical examinations, uniform fittings, and administrative procedures. Drill sergeants moved through the crowds like sharks, their voices cutting through the noise as they barked orders and corrections. Marcus found himself assigned to Delta Company, 4th Battalion, along with 63 other young men from various backgrounds. His bunkmate was Jake Morrison, a former high school football player from Texas who possessed the kind of natural athleticism and confidence that Marcus had always admired from a distance. Jake stood 6 feet 2 inches tall, with broad shoulders and an easy smile that made friends instantly. From their first conversation, Jake treated Marcus with casual dismissal. Not meanly exactly, but with the kind of benign indifference that Marcus had experienced throughout his life. Jake spoke about his plans to join the infantry, specifically hoping to become an Army Ranger, while Marcus listened quietly, unsure what his own future might hold. The drill sergeants running Delta Company were a formidable group led by Drill Sergeant Rodriguez, a compact man whose intensity seemed to fill every space he entered. During their initial formation, as the new recruits stood in uneven lines trying to approximate military bearing, Rodriguez's eyes swept across the group with obvious disapproval. When his gaze fell on Marcus, standing near the back of the formation, Rodriguez paused for a moment that seemed to stretch forever. Marcus felt himself being evaluated and found wanting, though no words were exchanged. The drill sergeant's expression suggested he had seen this type before and held little hope for their success. Basic training proved to be exactly the challenge Marcus had expected. The physical demands pushed him to his limits daily, and he often found himself among the slower runners during morning physical training. During combat exercises, his small stature made it difficult for him to keep pace with larger soldiers carrying the same equipment load. The obstacle course became a particular source of frustration, as his lack of upper body strength made several stations nearly impossible to complete within the time standards. Marcus's fellow recruits began to view him as someone who might not make it through the program. During evening conversations in the barracks, while others shared stories of their athletic achievements or discussed their excitement about upcoming training phases, Marcus often remained silent, focusing instead on maintaining his equipment or studying training manuals. The academics portion of basic training, however, revealed a different side of Marcus's abilities. While other soldiers struggled with map reading and navigation exercises, he demonstrated an intuitive understanding of topographical concepts that surprised his instructors. During weapons instruction, when recruits learned to disassemble and reassemble their rifles, Marcus completed the tasks with remarkable speed and accuracy, his fingers seeming to naturally understand the mechanical relationships between components. Staff Sergeant Thompson, who ran the marksmanship program, began to notice Marcus during the preliminary shooting instruction. While most recruits treated the sessions as exciting opportunities to fire real weapons, Marcus approached them with methodical seriousness. He listened intently to every detail about breathing techniques, sight alignment, and trigger control, taking notes in a small notebook that he kept in his cargo pocket. During the first live-fire exercise, recruits lay prone on the firing line with their M16A2 rifles, preparing to engage targets at various distances. The atmosphere buzzed with nervous energy as young men who had never fired military weapons prepared to test their skills. Jake Morrison, lying 2 positions down from Marcus, radiated confidence as he adjusted his position and lined up his first shots. When the command came to commence firing, the range erupted with the sharp cracks of rifle fire. Most recruits, overwhelmed by the noise and excitement, fired rapidly with mixed results. Jake managed respectable groupings, earning approving nods from the range safety officers. Several others struggled with basic marksmanship fundamentals, sending rounds scattered across the target area. Marcus took a different approach entirely. Before firing his first shot, he spent several long moments adjusting his position, checking his sight alignment, and controlling his breathing exactly as the instructors had demonstrated. His first round struck the target dead center. The second shot landed less than an inch away from the first. By the time he had fired his 10th round, Marcus had created a tight cluster of holes that could be covered by a quarter. Staff Sergeant Thompson approached Marcus's firing position with interest, examining the target through binoculars. The grouping was remarkable for any soldier, but especially impressive for someone firing military weapons for the first time. Thompson made a note in his evaluation book and continued down the line, but Marcus had caught his attention in a way that none of his previous training performance had achieved. As the weeks of basic training continued, a pattern emerged. Marcus continued to struggle with purely physical challenges, often finishing near the back of formation runs and requiring extra attempts to pass certain fitness tests. However, whenever training involved precision, technical skill, or careful attention to detail, he consistently outperformed his peers. During field exercises, while other soldiers focused on aggressive movement and speed, Marcus demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to remain undetected. He could position himself in terrain that seemed to offer no concealment, yet somehow become nearly invisible to opposing forces during training scenarios. His natural patience allowed him to remain motionless for hours when necessary, waiting for the perfect moment to achieve his objectives. The other recruits began to take notice of these skills, though their reactions varied. Some, like Jake Morrison, viewed Marcus's abilities as interesting but ultimately less important than traditional military virtues like physical strength and aggressive leadership. Others began to seek his help with technical subjects, recognizing that his methodical approach to learning often yielded better results than their own rushed efforts. Drill Sergeant Rodriguez, despite his initial skepticism, found himself paying closer attention to Marcus's performance. During equipment inspections, Marcus's gear was consistently the most properly maintained and organized in the platoon. His uniforms met standards that exceeded requirements, and he never failed to complete assigned tasks, regardless of how long they took. One evening, as the recruits sat in the barracks cleaning their weapons after a long day of field training, Rodriguez approached Marcus's bunk. The drill sergeant observed silently as Marcus disassembled his rifle with practiced efficiency, carefully cleaning each component before reassembly. The weapon, when completed, looked as though it had never been used. Rodriguez asked Marcus about his background, learning for the first time about the young soldier's rural upbringing and his experience with precision work on his grandfather's farm. The drill sergeant began to understand that Marcus possessed qualities that might prove valuable in the right military occupation, though he remained uncertain exactly where those skills might best be applied. As basic training neared its end, soldiers received their initial military occupational specialty assignments based on their performance, test scores, and the needs of the Army. Most of Delta Company's recruits received assignments that matched their expectations. Jake Morrison earned his desired infantry position, while others found themselves assigned to various combat arms or support roles based on their demonstrated abilities. When Marcus received his assignment papers, he discovered that he had been selected for additional training as a designated marksman, a role that would require advanced marksmanship instruction and specialized equipment. The assignment surprised him, as he had never expressed particular interest in becoming a sniper or precision shooter. However, Staff Sergeant Thompson had recommended Marcus for the program based on his demonstrated abilities and natural aptitude for detailed work. The graduation ceremony for Delta Company took place on a crisp October morning, with families gathered to witness their son's transformation from civilians into soldiers. Marcus's parents made the long drive from Ohio, his grandfather accompanying them despite his advancing age. As they watched their son march in formation with his fellow graduates, they saw subtle changes in his posture and bearing that suggested the beginning of genuine confidence. During the reception following the ceremony, Marcus's family met some of his drill instructors and fellow soldiers. Staff Sergeant Thompson took the opportunity to speak with Marcus's parents about their son's remarkable shooting abilities, explaining that the designated marksman program would provide him with opportunities to develop skills that could serve him well throughout his military career. Jake Morrison, preparing to leave for infantry training at Fort Campbell, approached Marcus to say goodbye. For the first time, Jake seemed to regard his former bunkmate with something approaching respect, acknowledging that Marcus had found his own path to success, even if it differed from more conventional routes. As Marcus prepared for his next phase of training, he reflected on the previous months with a mixture of pride and uncertainty. Basic training had taught him that he possessed capabilities he had never recognized, but it had also shown him how much he still needed to learn. The designation as a future marksman felt both exciting and daunting, representing opportunities and responsibilities he was not sure he was ready to accept. His grandfather, during their brief conversation at the graduation reception, offered words that would stay with Marcus throughout his career. The old man reminded him that precision and patience were gifts that became more valuable with time, and that the military would provide him with chances to develop those gifts in ways that civilian life never could. The bus ride to his next training assignment gave Marcus time to consider his future. Surrounded by other soldiers heading to various specialized schools, he realized that his journey was just beginning. The young man who had entered basic training as an overlooked farm kid was leaving as someone with recognized potential, though the true test of his abilities lay ahead in the more demanding world of advanced military training. The United States Army Sniper School at Fort Benning represented a completely different world from basic training. Where recruit training had focused on transforming civilians into soldiers, Sniper School demanded the evolution of soldiers into precision instruments of warfare. Marcus arrived at the facility on a gray November morning, carrying his duffel bag and a mixture of anticipation and anxiety that had grown stronger during his journey. The school facility itself seemed designed to intimidate. Nestled among Georgia pine forests, the compound featured state-of-the-art shooting ranges extending to distances that Marcus had never imagined engaging targets. The main building housed classrooms filled with sophisticated ballistics computers, weather monitoring equipment, and displays showing the intricate mathematics that governed long-range shooting. Everything about the environment suggested that this training would demand levels of precision and technical knowledge far beyond anything Marcus had previously encountered. His fellow students represented a carefully selected group from various military units. Unlike basic training, where recruits came from all backgrounds and ability levels, sniper school attracted only soldiers who had already demonstrated exceptional marksmanship skills. Some arrived from elite infantry units, others from special operations backgrounds, and a few came from military police or other specialties where shooting skills had been recognized and cultivated. Marcus quickly discovered that his previous success in basic marksmanship training, while impressive among general recruits, placed him near the bottom of this highly skilled group. During the initial evaluation exercises, students fired at targets from distances that pushed the limits of their equipment and abilities. Many of his classmates routinely achieved groupings that Marcus had considered remarkable, treating such accuracy as routine warm-up performance. Sergeant First Class David Mitchell ran the sniper school with an intensity that made even the toughest drill sergeants seem relaxed. A veteran of multiple combat deployments, Mitchell possessed the kind of quiet authority that came from years of making life-and-death decisions under pressure. His weathered face bore the marks of someone who had spent countless hours behind a rifle's scope, and his pale blue eyes seemed capable of measuring distances and calculating wind effects through pure instinct. During the first week of training, Mitchell addressed the assembled students with characteristic directness. He explained that approximately 40% of them would fail to complete the program, not due to lack of effort or dedication, but because the skills required for precision shooting under combat conditions could not be taught to everyone. Some soldiers possessed the mental makeup necessary for sniper work, while others, regardless of their other military virtues, simply did not. The academic portion of sniper training proved immediately challenging for Marcus. Students learned advanced ballistics calculations that accounted for factors he had never considered during his previous shooting experience. Temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and altitude all affected bullet trajectory in ways that required complex mathematical formulas to predict accurately. Wind reading became a science unto itself, with instructors teaching students to observe grass movement, mirage effects, and even subtle changes in flag behavior to determine precise wind speed and direction at various points along a bullet's flight path. Marcus found himself struggling to keep pace with classmates who seemed to grasp these concepts intuitively. During evening study sessions, while other students reviewed the material once before moving on to personal equipment maintenance, Marcus spent hours working through ballistics problems, checking and rechecking his calculations against answer keys. His methodical approach to learning, which had served him well in basic training, now seemed painfully slow compared to the rapid comprehension displayed by his peers. The physical demands of sniper training differed significantly from basic military fitness requirements. Students learned to move across terrain while carrying precision rifles, spotting scopes, and other specialized equipment that weighed considerably more than standard infantry gear. They practiced techniques for remaining motionless in uncomfortable positions for extended periods, developing the ability to maintain steady aim despite physical discomfort. More challenging than the physical requirements were the mental demands of precision shooting. During range exercises, students fired at targets from progressively longer distances, starting at ranges where slight errors in technique became magnified into significant misses. Marcus discovered that shooting accurately at 800 yards required not only perfect technical execution, but also a level of mental focus he had never needed to achieve. His first attempts at long-range shooting proved frustrating. While his fundamental marksmanship skills remained sound, the additional factors involved in extended-distance engagements seemed to overwhelm his ability to process information quickly enough. He would spend long minutes calculating solutions for range, wind, and environmental conditions, only to discover that conditions had changed by the time he was ready to fire. Master Sergeant Patricia Williams served as the school's chief instructor for field craft, the art of remaining undetected while maneuvering to shooting positions. A compact woman with graying hair and intense brown eyes, Williams had earned recognition as one of the Army's foremost experts in camouflage and concealment techniques. Her standards for student performance were absolute, accepting nothing less than complete invisibility when circumstances required it. During field exercises, Williams would position students in various terrain types, then attempt to locate them using binoculars, spotting scopes, and occasionally infrared detection equipment. Students who were discovered received immediate feedback about their mistakes, often accompanied by detailed explanations of the principles they had violated. The exercise continued until students could remain undetected for specified time periods while maintaining observation of designated targets. Marcus discovered that his natural patience and attention to detail translated well to field craft requirements. While other students sometimes became restless during long periods of motionless observation, Marcus seemed capable of entering an almost meditative state that allowed him to remain alert yet relaxed for hours at a time. His small stature, which had been a disadvantage during some aspects of basic training, proved beneficial when finding concealment in terrain that offered limited hiding options. However, his progress in fieldcraft could not compensate for his continued struggles with advanced marksmanship. As the course entered its third week, Marcus found himself falling behind classmates in shooting exercises that determined whether students would advance to more advanced phases of training. The gap between his performance and the standards expected for graduation seemed to widen daily, despite his dedicated efforts to improve. The pressure began affecting his confidence in ways he had not anticipated. During shooting exercises, Marcus would second-guess calculations he had performed correctly, leading to hasty corrections that often made his solutions less accurate. The knowledge that he was being constantly evaluated created a tension that interfered with the relaxed focus necessary for precision shooting. Other students began to notice Marcus's struggles, though their reactions varied considerably. Some offered helpful advice or shared techniques that had worked for them, while others seemed to view his difficulties as confirmation that he did not belong in the program. A few appeared relieved that someone else was having problems, as it reduced the pressure on their own performance. Specialist Rodriguez, a former infantry soldier from Colorado with extensive hunting experience, became an unexpected source of support for Marcus. Rodriguez had noticed that Marcus possessed solid fundamental skills, but seemed overwhelmed by the pace of instruction and the complexity of advanced techniques. During evening free time, Rodriguez began working with Marcus on simplified approaches to solving ballistics problems, helping him develop shortcuts that reduced calculation time without sacrificing accuracy. The mentoring relationship that developed between Rodriguez and Marcus illustrated one of the unexpected aspects of military training. Despite the competitive environment created by limited graduation slots, many students recognized that helping struggling classmates often reinforced their own understanding of complex subjects. Rodriguez discovered that explaining ballistics concepts to Marcus helped clarify his own grasp of the material. Meanwhile, Sergeant First Class Mitchell observed Marcus's performance with growing concern. Mitchell possessed extensive experience identifying students who might succeed with additional support versus those who simply lacked the aptitude necessary for sniper work. Marcus's case troubled him because the young soldier clearly possessed some of the rarest qualities needed for precision shooting, yet struggled with technical aspects that other students mastered easily. During the fourth week of training, Mitchell called Marcus to his office for a private consultation. The meeting, which Marcus had been dreading as a prelude to dismissal from the program, instead became an opportunity for honest assessment of his strengths and weaknesses. Mitchell explained that Marcus demonstrated exceptional patience, attention to detail, and natural field craft abilities that could not be taught. However, his struggles with rapid technical calculations and performance under time pressure raised questions about his suitability for missions requiring quick engagement decisions. Mitchell offered Marcus a choice that was unusual in military training environments. He could continue with the current class, accepting the high probability of failure due to his technical struggles, or he could recycle to the next class beginning in 6 weeks, using the additional time to develop his calculation skills and build confidence through extra practice. The decision required Marcus to honestly evaluate his own capabilities and commitment to the sniper specialty. Recycling would extend his training time significantly and mark him as someone who could not keep pace with his peers. However, it might also provide the additional preparation time necessary to succeed in a program that had already invested considerable resources in his development. Marcus chose to recycle, a decision that surprised some of his classmates who had assumed he would prefer to attempt completion with the current group rather than admit he needed additional preparation. Rodriguez supported the decision, pointing out that many successful snipers had required multiple attempts to complete the demanding program. The 6-week break between classes provided Marcus with opportunities he had not anticipated. Rather than simply waiting for the next course to begin, he was assigned to assist with maintenance of the school's equipment and facilities. This work gave him access to shooting ranges during off-hours and allowed him to practice advanced techniques without the pressure of formal evaluation. Master Sergeant Williams, impressed by Marcus's field craft abilities, arranged for him to participate in training exercises with other military units that used the school's facilities. These experiences exposed Marcus to different approaches to precision shooting and helped him understand how sniper skills integrated with larger military operations. During one memorable exercise with a Special Forces unit conducting advanced training, Marcus served as an opposing force member tasked with remaining undetected while observing their activities. His ability to blend into terrain that offered minimal concealment impressed the Special Forces soldiers, who were accustomed to dealing with highly skilled opponents. The exercise commander later commented to Williams that Marcus possessed natural field craft abilities that rivaled those of operators with years of combat experience. These positive experiences helped restore Marcus's confidence while providing practical insights into how his skills might be employed. He began to understand that successful snipers relied on combinations of abilities rather than excellence in any single area, and that his particular strengths might compensate for areas where he would always struggle to match his peers. When the next sniper school class began, Marcus approached the training with a different mindset. Instead of trying to compete directly with classmates who demonstrated superior technical abilities, he focused on steady improvement and consistent performance. The additional practice during his recycling period had improved his calculation speed significantly, though he still required more time than the fastest students to solve complex ballistics problems. The new class included several students who had also recycled from previous courses, creating a more supportive environment for soldiers who needed additional time to master difficult concepts. Marcus discovered that his experience with the training material allowed him to help newer students who were encountering advanced techniques for the first time, revering the role he had played during his first attempt. His shooting performance improved steadily throughout the course, though his progress followed a different pattern than most successful students. Rather than demonstrating rapid improvement followed by consistent high performance, Marcus showed gradual but steady advancement that eventually brought him to acceptable standards for most exercises. His field craft abilities continued to excel, earning recognition from instructors who rarely offered praise for student performance. As the course approached its final phases, Marcus found himself in an unexpected position. While he remained among the weaker shooters in terms of pure marksmanship, his overall performance placed him solidly in the group likely to graduate. More importantly, he had developed confidence in his abilities and understanding of how his particular combination of skills might prove valuable in operational environments. The transformation was evident to everyone who had observed his journey through the training program. The uncertain young soldier who had arrived at sniper school had evolved into someone who understood his capabilities and limitations, while possessing the technical knowledge necessary to employ precision shooting skills effectively. His graduation was no longer in doubt, though the true test of his abilities would come when he joined an operational unit and faced the challenges of applying his training in real-world situations. Marcus's first operational assignment came through orders that arrived on a cold February morning during his final week of sniper school. The 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment required a designated marksman to fill a vacancy created by a medical retirement, and Marcus's training scores, while not exceptional, met the unit's minimum requirements. More significantly, his demonstrated field craft abilities and patient temperament had impressed his instructors enough to recommend him for a unit known for demanding the highest standards from its personnel. The Rangers represented an elite level of military service that Marcus had never imagined joining. During his early military career, he had viewed such units as destinations for soldiers like Jake Morrison, men who possessed natural leadership qualities and aggressive confidence. The idea that his own methodical approach to military skills might prove valuable to an elite unit seemed almost impossible to believe. Fort Stewart, Georgia, became Marcus's new home as he reported to the 2nd Battalion in early March. The base buzzed with activity as Rangers prepared for an upcoming deployment to Afghanistan, conducting training exercises that pushed both individual soldiers and unit cohesion to their limits. Marcus arrived during a period of intense preparation, when every aspect of the battalion's capabilities was being tested and refined. Captain James Sullivan commanded Alpha Company, the unit to which Marcus was assigned. A veteran of 3 previous combat deployments, Sullivan possessed the kind of calm authority that came from leading soldiers through dangerous situations successfully. He had requested a designated marksman with strong field craft skills, specifically because his company often conducted missions requiring precise observation and selective engagement in complex terrain. Sullivan's initial interview with Marcus lasted less than 10 minutes, but covered topics that revealed the captain's priorities for his new soldier. Rather than focusing on shooting scores or technical certifications, Sullivan asked about Marcus's patience under pressure, his ability to remain undetected for extended periods, and his comfort level with making independent decisions when separated from direct supervision. The questions surprised Marcus, who had expected to be evaluated primarily on his marksmanship abilities. Sullivan explained that while shooting accuracy was certainly important, Rangers more often needed marksmen who could operate autonomously in challenging environments, gathering intelligence and providing precise fires only when absolutely necessary. The captain's emphasis on patience and independent thinking suggested that Marcus's personality traits might prove more valuable than his technical shooting skills. Marcus's squad leader, Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, approached integration of the new soldier with characteristic Ranger efficiency. Torres had served with the battalion for 4 years and possessed encyclopedic knowledge of how different soldier types could be employed most effectively during various mission profiles. His initial assessment of Marcus focused on practical capabilities rather than paper qualifications. During Marcus's first week with the unit, Torres arranged a series of informal evaluations designed to determine how the new soldier might fit into existing team dynamics. These exercises revealed strengths and weaknesses that formal training had not fully explored. Marcus demonstrated exceptional ability to establish concealed observation positions and maintain surveillance for hours without detection, but struggled with rapid movement techniques favored by Rangers for quick insertion and extraction. The other members of Marcus's squad represented a cross-section of Ranger capabilities. Sergeant First Class Antonio Jackson served as the squad's senior NCO, a position he had earned through exceptional performance during multiple combat deployments. Specialist Kevin Wung brought communications expertise that kept the squad connected to higher headquarters during complex operations. Private First Class Marcus Williams, who shared a first name with the new arrival, provided automatic weapons support with his squad automatic weapon. The team dynamics that emerged during initial training exercises reflected the different personalities and capabilities of each soldier. Jackson led with quiet confidence, making decisions quickly, but always explaining his reasoning to subordinates. Wung contributed technical knowledge that often proved crucial for mission success, while Williams provided steady reliability during physically demanding situations. Marcus initially struggled to find his place within this established team. His methodical approach to problem-solving sometimes conflicted with the rapid decision-making pace that Rangers typically employed. During movement exercises, his careful attention to concealment techniques slowed the squad's progress in situations where speed was prioritized over stealth. However, as the squad conducted more diverse training scenarios, Marcus's unique capabilities began to prove valuable. During one exercise that required long-term surveillance of a simulated enemy position, Marcus was able to establish an observation post that remained undetected throughout a 48-hour period, providing detailed intelligence that enabled the successful completion of the mission. Staff Sergeant Torres began to recognize that Marcus brought capabilities that complemented rather than duplicated the skills of other squad members. While Jackson excelled at rapid tactical decision-making, and Williams provided sustained firepower during aggressive operations, Marcus offered the patience and precision necessary for missions requiring careful observation and selective engagement. The squad's training intensified as deployment approached, with exercises becoming more complex and realistic. Rangers practiced urban warfare scenarios, mountain operations, and desert survival techniques that prepared them for the diverse environments they might encounter in Afghanistan. Each training phase tested different aspects of individual and team capabilities, revealing how soldiers performed under various types of stress. Marcus's performance during these exercises followed a consistent pattern. In scenarios requiring rapid movement and aggressive tactics, he remained competent but unremarkable. However, during exercises that demanded patience, precision, or extended periods of concealment, his performance often exceeded that of more experienced soldiers. His ability to remain motionless for hours, while maintaining alert observation, impressed even veteran rangers, who thought they had seen every type of military capability. One particularly challenging exercise took place in the mountains of North Georgia, where the squad was required to infiltrate a heavily defended area and gather intelligence without being detected. The terrain offered limited concealment, and opposing forces employed sophisticated detection equipment along likely infiltration routes. Most squads that attempted the exercise were discovered within 6 hours, forcing them to abort their missions. Marcus suggested an approach that differed significantly from standard ranger tactics. Instead of attempting rapid infiltration during limited windows of opportunity, he proposed a methodical advance that would take nearly 24 hours but offered greater probability of success. The plan required squad members to move in carefully coordinated stages, with each advance preceded by extended observation periods to ensure routes remained clear. Tours initially resisted the proposal, explaining that rangers typically relied on speed and surprise rather than prolonged stealth operations. However, the repeated failures of conventional approaches during previous exercise iterations convinced him to allow Marcus's strategy to be tested. The mission succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Marcus led the squad through terrain that opposing forces had considered impassable, using natural features and timing their movements to coincide with patterns he had observed in enemy patrol schedules. The intelligence-gathering phase of the mission was completed without detection, and the squad exfiltrated successfully while remaining completely unaware to defending forces. The exercise success marked a turning point in how Marcus was perceived within his unit. Squad members who had initially viewed him as an adequate but unremarkable addition began to recognize that his different approach to tactical problems might prove valuable in situations where conventional ranger tactics were inappropriate or impossible. Captain Sullivan received detailed reports about the exercise from tours and other observers, leading to a private conversation with Marcus about his tactical thinking and problem-solving approach. Sullivan was particularly interested in how Marcus had analyzed the enemy's detection capabilities and developed countermeasures that negated technological advantages through careful observation and patience. As the battalion's deployment date approached, Marcus found himself assigned to missions that specifically leveraged his demonstrated abilities. Rather than serving simply as additional rifle support, he was tasked with reconnaissance and surveillance duties that required extended independent operation. These assignments represented a significant vote of confidence from unit leadership, who were entrusting him with critical intelligence-gathering responsibilities. The pre-deployment training culminated in a major exercise that simulated the complex operational environment the battalion would encounter in Afghanistan. Multiple companies worked together to conduct coordinated operations across varied terrain, while sophisticated opposing forces attempted to disrupt their activities using tactics based on real enemy capabilities. Marcus's squad was assigned to establish an observation post overlooking a key transportation route that enemy forces were expected to use for moving supplies. The position needed to remain operational for 72 hours while providing continuous surveillance coverage without being detected. Success required not only technical proficiency, but also the mental stamina necessary for extended periods of alert observation. The mission began with a night infiltration that required the squad to traverse several miles of mountainous terrain while avoiding detection by patrolling enemy forces. Marcus took point for much of the movement, using his superior field craft abilities to guide the team through areas that offered concealment while maintaining progress toward their objective. Once in position, the squad established a hide site that showcased Marcus's understanding of camouflage and concealment principles. Working primarily during darkness hours to avoid visual detection, the team created an observation post that remained invisible to enemy forces despite being located less than 400 meters from a heavily traveled road. During the 72-hour surveillance period, Marcus served as the primary observer for approximately half of each day, maintaining detailed logs of enemy activity while remaining completely motionless for hours at a time. His patience and attention to detail produced intelligence reports that significantly exceeded the minimum requirements for the exercise. More importantly, Marcus's observation skills detected enemy reconnaissance efforts that had been missed by other surveillance teams. His identification of disguised enemy scouts conducting counter-surveillance operations allowed friendly forces to adjust their activities and avoid detection during subsequent phases of the exercise. The exercise concluded with Marcus receiving recognition from battalion leadership for his contributions to the overall mission success. Colonel Robert Hayes, the battalion commander, personally reviewed the intelligence reports that Marcus had generated and commented on their exceptional quality and tactical value. However, the true measure of Marcus's growing reputation within the unit came from his fellow Rangers. Soldiers who had initially viewed him with polite skepticism began seeking his input on tactical problems involving stealth and observation. Squad leaders from other units requested his participation in training exercises where his specific skills might prove beneficial. Staff Sergeant Torres submitted a formal evaluation of Marcus's performance that recommended him for additional specialized training in advanced reconnaissance techniques. The evaluation noted that while Marcus might never become a typical Ranger in terms of aggressive leadership and rapid assault capabilities, his unique combination of skills filled critical capability gaps within the battalion. As the deployment date arrived, Marcus faced the prospect of combat operations with a mixture of confidence and uncertainty. His training had prepared him technically for the challenges he would face, and his demonstrated performance during exercises suggested that his skills would prove valuable in operational environments. However, the transition from training exercises to real combat would test not only his technical abilities, but also his mental resilience under genuine life-and-death pressure. The transformation from overlooked recruit to valued team member had taken nearly 2 years, but Marcus had earned his place within an elite unit through steady performance and dedication to developing his unique capabilities. His fellow Rangers no longer viewed him as someone who had accidentally found himself among elite soldiers, but rather as a specialist whose particular skills contributed to overall unit effectiveness. As the battalion prepared for deployment to Afghanistan, Marcus understood that the true test of his abilities lay ahead. Combat would reveal whether the skills he had developed during training would translate into effective performance when lives depended on his precision and judgment. The young soldier who had once been dismissed as unlikely to succeed was about to face the ultimate evaluation of his worth as a professional warrior. The helicopter flight into Forward Operating Base Chapman in eastern Afghanistan marked Marcus's entry into a combat zone that would test every skill he had developed during his military training. The landscape below revealed a harsh beauty of snow-capped mountains and deep valleys, terrain that offered both strategic advantages and deadly challenges for military operations. As the aircraft descended toward the landing zone, Marcus felt the weight of transition from training exercises to genuine combat operations. Chapman served as home base for multiple military units conducting counterinsurgency operations throughout Paksha province. The base buzzed with constant activity as patrols departed for missions, logistics convoys arrived with supplies, and intelligence analysts processed information gathered from across the region. For Marcus, the environment represented his first exposure to the complex realities of modern warfare, where technical precision had to be balanced against political considerations and humanitarian concerns. Alpha Company's initial briefings painted a picture of an operational area where enemy forces employed sophisticated tactics to avoid direct confrontation with superior American firepower. Taliban fighters moved through mountain valleys using routes that had been developed over centuries of conflict, appearing suddenly to conduct attacks before disappearing into terrain they knew intimately. Countering these tactics required patience, detailed intelligence, and the ability to engage targets at extended ranges when opportunities presented themselves. Captain Sullivan assigned Marcus to a reconnaissance team led by Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, a veteran of multiple deployments who specialized in long-range surveillance operations. Rodriguez's team operated independently for extended periods, establishing observation posts in remote locations to gather intelligence about enemy movement patterns and weapon cache locations. The work demanded exactly the skills that Marcus had been developing throughout his military career. The team's first mission took them into the Spingar Mountains, where intelligence reports suggested Taliban forces were using hidden routes to transport weapons and personnel between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Marcus's job involved establishing and maintaining observation of key terrain features while remaining undetected for periods that might extend to several days. Success required not only technical competency, but also mental resilience during long hours of motionless surveillance. The infiltration began during pre-dawn darkness, with the four-man team moving carefully through terrain that offered limited concealment during daylight hours. Marcus carried his modified M14 enhanced battle rifle, along with specialized optics and communication equipment that would allow him to engage targets at distances exceeding 800 meters. The weight of equipment, combined with the altitude and rugged terrain, made movement physically demanding even for soldiers in excellent condition. After 6 hours of careful movement, the team established a hide site overlooking a valley that intelligence analysts believed contained a major smuggling route. The position required extensive camouflage work to remain invisible to enemy observers, and Marcus found himself drawing on fieldcraft techniques he had practiced countless times during training. However, the consequences of detection in this environment involved much more than exercise failure. The first 48 hours of the mission passed without significant enemy activity, testing the team's patience and discipline. Marcus maintained his assigned observation sectors, while Rodriguez monitored communications and coordinated with higher headquarters. The monotonous nature of the work was broken only by the need to remain absolutely still whenever local civilians moved through the area, as any detected foreign presence would likely be reported to Taliban forces. On the third day, Marcus observed movement in the valley that immediately attracted his attention. 3 men carrying heavy packs were moving along what appeared to be a game trail, but their equipment and movement patterns suggested military rather than civilian activity. Through his spotting scope, Marcus could identify weapons and what appeared to be explosive devices among the equipment being transported. Rodriguez confirmed the observation and initiated communication with battalion headquarters to report the contact. The decision-making process that followed illustrated the complex considerations involved in modern combat operations. Rules of engagement required positive identification of hostile intent before weapons could be employed, while operational considerations demanded quick action to prevent enemy forces from escaping into terrain where they could not be effectively engaged. Marcus maintained observation of the 3 individuals, while Rodriguez coordinated with higher headquarters to determine the appropriate response. The targets moved slowly but steadily toward terrain that would provide them with cover from observation and direct fire. Time pressure mounted as the window of opportunity for engagement began to close. The authorization to engage came through encrypted radio communication just as the targets approached the edge of effective range. Marcus had been tracking their movement for over an hour, calculating range and wind conditions while preparing for the possibility of engagement. When the order came, he was ready to execute immediately. His first shot struck the lead target center mass at a range of just over 700 meters, dropping the man instantly. The remaining 2 targets attempted to take cover behind rocks that provided only partial concealment from Marcus's elevated position. His second shot, fired less than 10 seconds after the first, eliminated the second target before he could effectively return fire. The third enemy fighter managed to find better cover and began attempting to engage the observation post with automatic rifle fire. However, Marcus's position had been carefully selected to minimize exposure while maximizing observation capabilities. The enemy's shots struck rocks several feet below the hide site, creating impressive displays of sparks and stone fragments, but posing no real threat to the concealed rangers. Marcus waited patiently for the enemy fighter to expose himself sufficiently for engagement. After several minutes of ineffective fire, the man attempted to move to a better position, briefly exposing his upper torso as he climbed over a boulder. Marcus's third shot ended the engagement decisively, demonstrating the value of patient observation and precise shot placement over rapid fire. The successful engagement provided Marcus's first combat experience with the realities of taking human life in warfare. While his training had prepared him technically for such situations, the emotional and psychological impact of killing enemy fighters required mental processing that extended well beyond the immediate tactical situation. Rodriguez, recognizing the significance of the moment, took time to discuss the engagement with Marcus and ensure that he understood the context and justification for his actions. Recovery of equipment from the engagement site revealed that the team had disrupted a significant enemy operation. The three fighters had been transporting sophisticated improvised explosive devices along with detailed plans for attacks against coalition forces. Intelligence analysts later determined that Marcus's precise shooting had prevented attacks that might have caused numerous friendly casualties. Word of the successful engagement spread quickly through the battalion, establishing Marcus's reputation as an effective combat marksman. However, the recognition came with increased expectations and more challenging mission assignments. Captain Sullivan began requesting Marcus specifically for operations that required precision shooting capabilities, placing additional pressure on the young soldier to maintain high-performance standards. The second significant engagement occurred 3 weeks later during a mission to clear a village suspected of harboring Taliban commanders. Marcus was positioned on high ground overlooking the settlement, tasked with providing overwatch protection for infantry soldiers conducting house-to-house searches. The assignment required him to maintain observation of multiple buildings simultaneously while remaining ready to engage threats that might emerge suddenly. The operation proceeded smoothly until infantry soldiers encountered unexpected resistance from a fortified compound on the village's eastern edge. Enemy fighters had prepared defensive positions that offered excellent protection from direct assault while providing clear fields of fire against approaching coalition forces. The situation quickly developed into a standoff that threatened to result in significant friendly casualties if conventional assault tactics were employed. Marcus observed the enemy positions through his rifle scope, identifying several fighters who were engaging friendly forces with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. The range to targets exceeded 600 meters, requiring precise calculation of environmental factors that could significantly affect bullet trajectory. Wind conditions in the mountain valley created additional complications, with different velocities and directions at various points along potential bullet paths. The tactical situation demanded rapid but accurate engagements to suppress enemy fire and allow friendly forces to maneuver safely. Marcus began engaging targets systematically, prioritizing those who posed the greatest immediate threat to coalition soldiers. His first shot eliminated a machine gunner who had been effectively pinning down an entire squad of infantry soldiers. The precision of Marcus's shooting became evident as subsequent shots consistently found their targets despite challenging environmental conditions. Enemy fighters attempting to reposition themselves discovered that movement resulted in immediate and accurate engagement from an unseen marksman. The psychological effect of precise, long-range fire proved as valuable as the physical elimination of specific threats. Within 20 minutes, Marcus had fired 11 shots and achieved 9 confirmed hits on enemy fighters. The remaining opposition ceased effective resistance and either surrendered or fled the compound, allowing infantry forces to complete their search operations without sustaining casualties. The engagement demonstrated not only Marcus's shooting abilities, but also his capacity to perform under pressure while friendly forces depended on his support. Colonel Hayes personally reviewed the after-action reports from both engagements, noting the exceptional performance that Marcus had demonstrated during critical moments. The colonel's evaluation led to recommendations for additional specialized training and possible assignment to even more elite units within the special operations community. However, Marcus's growing reputation also attracted attention from enemy forces who began actively seeking to identify and eliminate the American marksmen who had been disrupting their operations. Intelligence reports indicated that Taliban commanders had placed bounties on coalition snipers and were employing counter-sniper tactics designed to locate and engage precision shooters. This development added new dimensions to Marcus's missions, requiring enhanced camouflage techniques and more frequent position changes to avoid enemy detection. The cat-and-mouse game that evolved between Marcus and enemy forces tested his field craft abilities in ways that no training exercise could replicate. Survival depended on maintaining the advantages of concealment and surprise, while operating in an environment where the enemy possessed intimate knowledge of local terrain. The psychological pressure of being specifically targeted by enemy forces affected Marcus differently than he had anticipated. Rather than creating paralyzing fear, the knowledge that skilled opponents were actively hunting him seemed to sharpen his focus and attention to detail. He began developing innovative camouflage techniques and movement patterns that exceeded even the high standards he had learned during formal training. Rodriguez observed these developments with professional interest, noting that combat experience was transforming Marcus from a technically competent marksman into a genuinely dangerous opponent for enemy forces. The patient, methodical approach that had once seemed like a limitation in fast-paced training scenarios now proved ideally suited to the deliberate nature of precision shooting in combat environments. As Marcus's deployment progressed, his role within the company evolved to reflect his demonstrated capabilities and growing experience. He began training other soldiers in advanced field craft techniques, sharing knowledge gained through actual combat application. Junior marksmen sought his mentorship, recognizing that his unique combination of technical skills and combat experience offered valuable insights for their own development. The transformation from uncertain trainee to combat-proven specialist had taken place over months of steady performance under increasingly challenging conditions. Marcus had discovered that the qualities which had made him seem unremarkable during basic training, patience, attention to detail, and methodical problem-solving, were exactly the attributes needed for success in his chosen military specialty. His reputation within the battalion was no longer based on potential or training scores, but on proven performance during situations where accuracy meant the difference between mission success and failure, between friendly casualties and safe mission completion. The young soldier who had once worried about meeting basic military standards had become someone whose precision and reliability were taken for granted by the Rangers who served alongside him. As his first combat deployment neared its end, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him from an overlooked farm kid to a respected member of an elite military unit. The skills he had developed and the confidence he had gained would serve as the foundation for future challenges. But more importantly, they had proven to himself and others that worth could not always be measured by conventional standards or obvious attributes.